Welcome to GeoLingo.Breakpoint, where we decode the fractures of global power one break at a time. Has capitalism stopped needing us? Today's episode confronts an unsettling truth. Capitalism no longer needs us. It doesn't need workers. It doesn't need voters. It doesn't even need citizens. Instead of producing prosperity, it now manufactures obedience. This is not evolution. This is rupture. What was capitalism originally meant to do? For most of the 20th century, capitalism was built on production. Factories, railroads, ports, farms, energy grids. Nations grew wealthier through labor, innovation, and infrastructure. The philosophy behind it was deeply modern: progress, rationality, merit, improvement of the human condition through effort and technology. Social mobility was the moral backbone. If you studied, worked, saved, and obeyed the rules, you could advance. Maybe not far, but far enough. Capitalism depended on a growing middle class, on workers and consumers, on families who believed tomorrow would be better. This is what made it legitimate in the eyes of millions. It offered a contract, and for a while, that contract seemed to work. What were its contradictions? It promised equal opportunity, but delivered unequal outcomes. It praised competition, but created monopolies and cronyism. It spoke of freedom, but outsourced suffering to colonies and developing nations. Capitalism coexisted with racism, patriarchy, and war. Even at its most productive, it was always a double-edged system. But it still needed people. People to work, to consume, to pay taxes, to reproduce. Jobs, education, families, these were essential to the machine. When did the machine change? The late 20th century saw a profound shift. Neoliberal reforms privatized public goods, deregulated markets, and gave corporations more power than governments. Production became secondary. Speculation became king. Manufacturing was offshored. Small towns collapsed. Jobs were automated. Capitalism stopped caring about building things. It began optimizing for speed and yield, and humans were too slow. Why did finance replace industry? Because finance doesn't need factories. It doesn't need labor rights or unions. It doesn't depend on geography or seasons. Finance moves across borders, operates through code, and accumulates power without friction. In the past, the system needed engineers, miners, teachers, voters. Today, it needs none of that. It thrives on leverage, not labor. Global finance no longer needs the middle class. It doesn't need your vote, your work, or your consent. Its goal is no longer to build. It is to extract value, attention, obedience. Why is democracy becoming a threat? Democracy was once capitalism's stabilizer, a mechanism to ensure consent and order. Now it's an obstacle. Voters demand accountability. Parliaments delay action. Protests disrupt markets. That's why modern capitalism is drifting toward post-democracy. The less democracy, the more control. The fewer rights, the more predictability. In this logic, dissent becomes volatility. Free speech becomes risk. Transparency becomes inefficiency. How do corporations sell obedience as progress? Through language. Big tech and financial giants wrap surveillance in progressive language. They speak of inclusion, safety, sustainability, and ethics. But what they deliver is profiling, censorship, and social engineering. They rebrand liberalism into a product. Citizenship becomes a service. Dissent becomes extremism. Individuality becomes a threat. What happened to social mobility? It stalled, then it reversed. Today, your zip code predicts your future more than your talent. Young generations inherit debt, not wealth. Gig jobs, not careers. Screens, not homes. The rungs of the ladder were not just pulled up, they were repurposed into walls. The promise of education as a path forward now hides a trap of loans and disillusionment. Capitalism once offered mobility. Now it offers subscriptions. Is macroeconomics being weaponized? Governments no longer manage economies. They manage populations through economies. Debt is no longer a phase. It is the system. Inflation is tolerated until politically useful. Interest rates become social punishments. Austerity is sold as responsibility, but functions as discipline. Budgets are no longer tools for development, but algorithms for control. What role does globalism play in this shift? Globalism gave corporations a passport and stripped nations of borders. It allowed wealth to flow freely, but trapped people in systems they didn't choose. Trade agreements overwrite constitutions. Foreign courts judge domestic laws. The IMF, WTO, and World Bank serve markets, not citizens. Globalism became the architecture of elite escape, from taxes, from labor laws, from democracy. What kind of control is being engineered? Financial and tech conglomerates now design society from the top down. Control is not just a feature, it is the product. Digital IDs, centralized currencies, biometric scans. The goal is full spectrum predictability. No protests, no variables, no noise. A smooth, programmable population that won't ask why. Is this inspired by China? The Chinese model is capitalism with censorship and centralized power. It delivers growth without liberty, infrastructure without voice. The West is quietly absorbing that template, but with cleaner branding. In Europe and North America, surveillance is sold as innovation, social scoring as safety. The state and corporations merge behind closed algorithms. What you do, say, or buy becomes a currency or a risk. What is the truth behind the 2045 agenda? You've heard the promises: sustainability, inclusion, equity, well-being for all. But none of that is guaranteed. None of it is accountable. The 2045 agenda is a dream, but whose? For elites, it offers automated wealth, digital governance, and safe distance from the governed. For the rest, it risks becoming a managed existence, optimized, sanitized, and surveilled. Will it bring well-being for all, or just secure the top of the pyramid? Thanks for joining us on GeoLingo.Breakpoint. If this episode opened your eyes, help us open more. Click like, subscribe, and activate the notification bell so you don't miss our next drop. Because here, we say what others won't, and soon, that might be forbidden. Thank you for listening.